Okay, everyone, hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Light of Insight. I'm your host, Nina, and today we have a very, very special guest who I am so thrilled to introduce and excited to talk to about creativity. That is going to be kind of the center of our conversation today. And I'd love to introduce Nori, who is a Japanese British born artist who is currently based in Tokyo, and he is a creativity and mindfulness coach who guides people to not only unlock their creative potential, but also to practice the art of mindfulness through self expression. So, everyone, let me introduce Nori. Welcome to the Light of Insight.
Hi, thank you very much for the lovely introduction. It's very nice to be here, and I'm excited for my very first podcast. So yeah.
Yay! Yes, first podcast. Oh, it's going to be such an amazing experience.
Mhm.
And the first question that I love to ask you, Nori, is what's lighting you up right now?
Mm. Um, it's a very nice question to begin the podcast. But at the moment, I think so. I originally am an artist, but I'm moving into this space of coaching people on creativity and mindfulness. So this whole new learning process and discovering new waters is what's kind of lighting me up. It's really exciting. Um, you know, Gaining new knowledge and interacting with different people that I don't usually interact with is very fulfilling. And this journey is something that's really giving me joy at the moment.
Oh, and I am so excited that you're entering this journey as well.
Mm.
So just to preface, Nori and I met through a networking event in Tokyo. I think it was in December, actually. So just a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And when I met Nori, I was so excited to hear that he also focused on coaching. And we planned a lunch together. And then we went into all these incredible topics, of course, related to coaching, but also just the deep spiritual stuff that we both love to like geek out on.
Right, right. It was a proper
And
geek out session. Yeah.
it was a proper geek out session. And I was just like, okay, I need to get Nori on the podcast, also understand more of his work and how he um, kind of engages with creativity through kind of a spiritual lens. So I've just been super excited about this conversation and equally excited about this journey that you are on in helping creatives unlock more of that power within. But before we get more into that, I do want to ask you more about your background first, because it always helps the listeners kind of get a deeper understanding of who you are. So I do want to ask you, I mentioned in the introduction that you are Japanese British, but can you kind of share us about your background growing up Japanese British in London?
Right. Of course. As you mentioned, I'm Japanese British. So my parents are both Japanese, but I was born and raised in the UK, North London, until I was like 25 before I moved to Japan. And I would say like it was a very fun and unique experience for me, and it came in like waves. So there were some parts where were really enjoyable, but then there were some tough times. So like what you would call an identity crisis, and as I'm sure a lot of us know a lot about. So during primary school, I was living in a neighborhood which was quite diverse. So it wasn't just Caucasians, but there was a lot of Asian people as well. So I grew up with Indian people. I grew up with Jewish people, and it was very diverse and accepting in terms of a community. So it was really enjoyable because I get to learn about different cultures. I would go to I forget I forget the name, but like these rituals. I went to like bar mitzvahs and so on to kind of experience like different cultures, and it was really interesting. for me, and I felt accepted as well. But then as I grew older, I moved to a different place for high school, and that was a predominantly Caucasian area. So I didn't get that diversity. I didn't feel as accepted, and the sort of crowd I couldn't really fit into. So that's when I first experienced this sort of minority feel. So I felt more of a minority there. So that was a very it was a hard time, but that allowed me to kind of dive more into my Japanese side. So growing up, we would go to this Saturday school where we learned 3 hours of Japanese, and the people there were people like me, so Japanese but grew up in the UK, or they could be people from Japan coming to the UK for their parents' business, and they were here for maybe like 4 or 5 years, and they didn't want their children to forget Japanese, so they'll send them to this Saturday school. And before I really didn't enjoy going to this school because all my mates are out there playing and going to movies and going bowling and stuff, and I was like, why can't I go? I have to go to this like school to learn Japanese, and at the beginning I really didn't like it, but at this time when I was in high school where I didn't really fit in from Monday to Friday at this high school, this Saturday school was kind of like a saving grace where I could, express myself in a different way, learn about the Japanese culture. So that's where I learned a lot about Japanese music, Japanese comedy, and interact more in Japanese. So that was, I would say, a very, you know, it was quite nice for me to have a second home almost. And at the same time, like it allowed me to express myself very differently, like almost to the level that I feel very cringe in like looking back at old photos because I went quite Japanese. If you like compared to what I was or who I was when I was in primary school.
Mm.
Yeah.
So can you take us a little bit deeper there? What do you mean it was cringe? Like it being really Japanese? Because
Right.
some people
Okay.
might not know what that means.
Right. That's true. That's true. So at the time, like, I was introduced to a lot of like Japanese music, and Japanese music kind of comprises of like some idol groups as well. So if you know like Japanese pop culture, then like Chinese, you have like Chinese
Mm.
idols, those sort of people. And then I would kind of like get into that and try to dress up like them almost, which is like quite.
Mm.
I'm not sure how I would describe it, but like it's just like very out there sort of. And I naturally have like wavy or like curly hair, but I would straighten it because all the people in the idol group have like straight, nice hair. So I would like straighten it and yeah, just like dressed. Yeah, I put a lot of effort into how I dressed, even though like looking back on it, it's not something I would wear now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, I guess just yeah, taking on like a persona almost of like that those idol groups, and at the same time incorporating like Japanese comedy into like conversations, and so I'm being like
Mm.
very Japanese style funny, which is quite hard to
Mhm.
explain because it's quite slapstick
Yeah.
comedy, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, just trying to imitate a lot of people that I found interesting at the time. I'm
Mm.
not sure if that
Mhm.
answers your question. I'm not sure if it's
Yeah.
going that deep,
It
but
definitely does. It's
yeah.
it's it's really interesting. When you're explaining this, the question that came to mind was, did this make you feel more connected to your Japanese identity?
I guess it did. I felt Yeah, I would say like it really made me feel more Japanese and, notice that I have a side of me that is very different to my uh, British side. And I'm not sure if you feel this as well, but like the personalities varies a little bit, even like how we talk when we're speaking English or when we're speaking Japanese changes a little bit. And noticing
Mhm.
these differences also allowed me to kind of get a better understanding of who I am in these two languages.
Oh my gosh. I can so relate. And I always love asking these questions to people that have these bicultural, multicultural backgrounds, and especially how language plays such a big role in how we perceive and how we understand who ourselves to be, because language is a way to express. It's a way to communicate and express what's in our hearts, what's in our minds. And for me, it's always been so English is my first language, and Japanese, I've always felt so self conscious of my Japanese abilities, which therefore made me really insecure about my Japanese identity
Hmm.
because I felt like such a lack of belonging there, not being able to fully communicate and express. And then coming here too, that's just been such a big journey as well. I wanted to ask you, so when you were growing up in London, did you ever have that pull or feeling that I need to live in Japan one day?
Um, I'm, I don't think I had a strong pull.
Mm.
We would always go back to Japan or go to Japan every like once in 2 years for like a summer holiday with the family to see grandparents and relatives. And that was a lot of fun every time we went. So, I did like Japan, going to Japan, but I never had this strong pull of, oh, I want to live here one day.
Mm. Mhm.
So it was only by chance that I ended up here. So going back to, you know, after high school, I went to university and then I, reinvented myself a little bit just to kind of like, because I went to a university outside of London. So I was able to kind of like, there's no one that I know. And, I'm able to reinvent myself. And that's where I kind of like merged the two identities together a little bit.
Mm.
But then after I graduated from university, like I was looking for jobs, but at the time it was very hard to find like internships where you can gain experience, and all the jobs they were asking for 2 years experience at least,
Mm.
plus an education, which is very difficult when you're going to university, and then I was working at restaurants during like the holidays and so on. So I didn't have any of that experience. So it's very hard to find internships or experience or find work. And this one place was offering an internship in Japan because they had a
Mm.
Japanese office as well as a London office. And they said, like, if you can speak both languages, then it's probably better, or it might be a good experience to work in Japan. And that was only for 6 months. So I was under the impression of like I'll be there for like 6 months, work there, and then come back. That was like how I felt at the time.
Mm.
But once I got here and I started working here, one thing led to another, and like I got a different job offer, and it's quite fun living in Japan. So that just kind of like carried on, and it's now like
Mhm.
8 or 9 years in Japan. So you never know what
Mhm.
happens. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Mm,
Going back to when you just shared in university time and
mm.
you reinvented yourself and you kind of integrated both identities, did that happen consciously, or was that when you look back on it now, it's like, oh yeah, kind of just happened?
I think it was a conscious decision as well, mainly because I didn't really fit in high school. and I kind of had this people pleasing aspect of myself, and I also like to observe people, not like judge people or anything, but just like observe like what sort of kids are popular and what sort of kids are considered funny, and I kind of like observed that. And in university, I tried to kind of become that popular kid.
Mm.
What you would call in the UK as a lad, someone who would just be very like boisterous and outgoing and be up for anything, and you know um, kind of the center of attention almost. So I tried to kind of build that up, but I think I naturally had that inside me as well. At the same time, like I always like to make people laugh or make people smile. So I always had that inside me. So I think that kind of like took a different route, and yeah, tried to become this lad.
Mm.
And at the same time, like I was okay with expressing my Japanese side as well, which I didn't feel in high school because uh, was everyone didn't was everyone wasn't exposed to like different cultures as much.
Mm.
So it was hard
Mhm.
to kind of like bring out my Japanese side. Whereas in
Mm.
university, there were a lot of people from different backgrounds, different parts of the UK. So it was very easy for me to let out my Japanese side as well and be like, this
Mm.
is what we do in Japan, or these are the sort of foods that we eat. This is the sort of comedy that we kind of enjoy. So yeah,
Mm.
I was able to kind of bring that more out and kind of
Mm.
like merge. Yeah, that's why those two cultures kind of like merged naturally. And at the same
Mhm.
time, I tried to build myself up, but from there, like I was able to discover parts of myself that I didn't really give any attention to before,
Mm. So
if that makes sense.
interesting. And how about now living in Japan for almost 8, 9 years? How is that, how is your relationship to your biculturalness now?
Right. So coming to Japan, it was like quite difficult for me to transition into Japanese culture, or like Japanese business culture to be more specific, because it's a very different, language. Like business Japanese is a very different language, as I'm sure you know, and it's very there's a hierarchy, and you talk respectfully to your elders, and there's certain kind of like boundaries that you set for your colleagues. So
Mm.
understanding that was very difficult, and I tried to act Japanese. So this is again me trying to build an identity for myself to fit into this Japanese business environment. Trying
Mm.
to be more Japanese, trying to be like everyone else, but that just became very stressful and tiring
Mm.
because I wanted to express myself more. Whereas in certain Japanese business cultures, you should keep your opinions to yourself and just kind of like agree to what the manager is saying. And in certain times, I was very outspoken, and that was me naturally. So there's a bit of turmoil during the first couple of years, but then slowly I felt like there's no reason for me to be like them, because no matter how many years I spend in Japan, I would I would probably never be accepted as one of them anyway.
Mm.
So why not just be myself, naturally myself? So this Japanese person who has spent some time abroad and has different values and speaks with a little bit of an accent, that sort of person, and I became more okay with that. So that
Mm.
was a very nice transition to now where I feel more comfortable in both identities. So even when I go back to the UK or when I'm in Japan, I feel comfortable being that strange guy who doesn't quite fit in but can speak two languages. That sort of person, you know?
Oh, that is so beautiful. I can ask you so many more questions about identity, but that might have to come for another podcast together because now I do want to ask you about your work and creativity. So now I do want to ask you, Nori, how did creativity and art become an important part of your life?
Right. Thank you for the question on yeah, creativity. I mean, art and creativity has always been something in me ever since I was a kid. So I like to draw. My parents were very strict, so they didn't allow like video games. So how I would play is go outside and play with like my mates, and there was a lot of creativity in that because we didn't have any tools, we didn't have a PlayStation, we didn't have a console. We were just out there. What should we do? Let's invent this game. You know, it's like let's merge hide and seek and this other game together, and let's make it into a hybrid sort of game. Or yeah, just like use chess pieces, but kind of like flick the chess pieces instead of like moving the chess pieces to kind of
Oh.
defeat the other side. So yeah, we always found these creative ways of entertaining ourselves without using these, you know, digital forms of entertainment. So I think
Mm.
that's where a lot of creativity came into play. But with art, I always like to draw, and that's something I always studied at in school. And
Mm.
although I did want to pursue it in university, you know, having Japanese parents, they considered it a non-realistic career. So
Mm.
I couldn't go
Mhm.
down that route. But yeah, it's always been there. So even at university, even when I came to Japan and entered the corporate world, I would always be drawing on the side.
Well, it's interesting that it kind of connects to um, you sharing that your parents didn't kind of, I don't know, imagine that this can be something that you could make a living of. And I think that's a very common story that I hear, especially from artists and creatives, like their parents, specifically parents that are coming from Asian backgrounds or especially in America, it's like parents that are immigrants that are coming into the States. Like they don't want their child to do anything that is risky, perceived as risky, right? So they always tell them to go down the very safe, more rational paths. I'm wondering when, like growing up, parents it sounds like they were pretty strict. Did you feel like you wanted to rebel, or did you feel very much like I need to like please and obey?
I think there was a bit of both. I did a lot of rebelling during my high school, university years in different, you know, areas like, you know, going out or like, you know, drinking and that sort of thing. But in terms of like career choice, I did feel like I should listen to what they're saying because they've, you know, been supportive in very different ways. So you know, like paying for tuition and kind of allowing me to learn different things, like you know, learning instruments or learning like martial arts, for example. So I felt that they had a say in it just as much as I did. And at the time, I was wanting to go to art university, but you know, felt frustrated that I couldn't. But now looking back, I realized that you know they didn't want me to, as you said before, that as immigrants they want it's their children to have a stable life and you know a fulfilling life. and they felt that pursuing more stable jobs or stable careers would be safer for me. So they had their best interest in saying so. They weren't necessarily trying to stop me from doing what I wanted to do. So yeah, I think it was a bit of both of people pleasing and later on, it's not necessarily a rebellion. It's more like, look, listen, I've spent enough time working in the corporate fields, but
Right.
I can't do it anymore. I need to be more
Mm,
creative and to
mm,
walk down my own path. And they understood
mm,
after I've, actually been working in the corporate world for like 5 years or so.
mm, mhm,
They
mhm,
were accepting, and in like the big, if you look at the big picture, because I was able to go into different industries in the corporate world, I was able to learn business skills that I currently use now as an artist and as a coach, as
mhm,
like entrepreneurial skills, communication skills, and just a lot of like different skills I've accumulated because I went through that route instead of going
mm,
through like a university or art university and then going down the traditional path.
mhm.
So yeah, like now looking back on it, it feels like I was meant to take that path, and I'm very grateful for my parents for pushing me down that path too.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Um, just because you kind of touched on the connection with your creative work and then also you doing coaching, I now want to hear where you see the connection between the two and how did that feeling of, oh, coaching might be such a great layer to put on this um, passion that I have for creativity. Kind of walk us through how that all unfolded in your life.
Oh, that's a very nice transition that you've made.
Thanks.
Yeah, so like I always thought that creating was my path, but then
Mm,
I do a lot of like introspection, and through introspection, I learned that I like to teach as well. I really enjoy teaching,
mm,
and I've taught people in different areas. So like if I was in a corporate world, I would teach like the new grads that will come into the company. There were certain occasions where I would teach English to Japanese students, and all these teaching experiences allowed me to realize that I do like sharing my knowledge, and I do like seeing people grow and improve themselves in different areas. So that kind of led me into coaching. And what can I coach
mm,
people on? English is one thing, but what am I most passionate about is creativity. And
mm.
when you say like, how does creativity link in with, you know, wait, what was the question? Sorry.
Yeah. How does creativity connect with this self growth healing
Right.
world, with that body of work?
Okay. Right. So, how does creativity connect with growth and healing? I think it
Mm,
goes both ways. So, at the same time, like creativity allows us to express ourselves and think in different ways, look at new perspectives, and looking at new perspectives is exciting and it brings us joy. And that alone brings us, happiness, and it reduces stress if you're thinking differently and understanding new concepts. And creativity is everywhere, like even just
mm,
adding some spice to your meal because you think it goes well, that is a creative choice, right? Like otherwise, if there wasn't
mm,
any creativity, then every day would be the same because we're not
right.
making, new decisions or new choices based on how we feel or what you think might be better. There's no innovation.
Mm,
So I think
mm,
creativity is everywhere, and it helps us to stay alive, excited and inspired. So I think
mm,
it does have a lot of psychological benefits to be creative.
mm.
And if you're expressing yourself through art or singing or dancing, you're being yourself, as long as you're not being restricted to perform or do something in a certain way. I think that allows us to be who we are, and that in turn allows us to be happy and fall more in love with ourselves, and therefore heal and grow from that creation. And at the same
Yeah.
time, creating comes from a place of stillness. And there's an author called Eckhart Tolle. He's a German author,
Mhm.
and I was reading The Power of Now. I think it was in The Power of Now, but like he says that that creation or artists create from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. And I think he's hit the nail on the head with that one, because I also feel that if I'm thinking of different things, if I'm thinking of what to do next, or how that might think of me, then I can't think of like new ideas from that space, because my head's like
Mhm.
too busy with different thoughts and different ideas.
Mhm.
So having a clear mind and a very peaceful mind allows us to extract from past experiences and inspirations to create within our heads these new ideas and new concepts, and therefore output in your own way. So I think
Mhm.
meditation for me has helped me in my creative process as well. So you can't really, well, I wouldn't say you can't, but it's hard to express yourself if you don't know yourself. And
Mm.
to know yourself, you need to look inwards instead of outwards. So yeah, I think it's a constant cycle of creativity and self growth, for me at least, anyway. So yeah, I
Mhm.
think it goes both way.
Yeah, I like how you talked about. I'm visualizing some kind of image, but they're definitely both mutually reinforcing each other at the same
Mm,
time, creativity and healing. And I love how you specify that, yeah, creativity isn't just one thing. It's not just painting or it's not just singing. And it's like literally, I love that example, adding different spices to that stew that you're making. Cooking is a beautiful creative process. Or pitching an idea, a project in your company. Like there's so many things that are creative that maybe we don't think immediately that is creative, but I would argue that every discipline, field, even me working in a university doing research right now as well, like that is such a creative process, research is. And you don't immediately think that because, yeah, there's a lot of, it's very structural. It's very like there is a strict way that you go about the degree, but it's your thesis that you're writing, it's your project that you are creating, it's the ideas that you are downloading, thinking about, and then taking action on expressing, which is the writing of it. So if we think about creativity, it's this huge, vast land of different possibilities. And I just absolutely love what you said about Eckhart Tolle. I'll also
mhm.
link him in the show notes. Uh, Incredible. He actually changed my life when I read A New Earth and The Power of Now. So true. It has to come from stillness if we are thinking about being judged or how we're being perceived, or you know it it's not this space where it is natural to create and produce because your body is kind of tensing up. I'm thinking specifically as of dancing right now because I've danced my whole life. And if I am in this state of fear or in this state of fear of being judged or fear of being seen, of course, my body is not moving the way that I know it can when I am in a state of pure presence and somehow connected to something that is, I believe, that is out of me, higher than me. It's such a different feeling. And so I think this is a nice transition as well, because I think we named some common blocks.
Mm.
There's a lot of fears that come with creativity, but can you kind of share? It could be your experience or people that you've worked with, talked with. Like, what are some common blocks for creatives? Even if you don't identify as a creative, but for people that even want to take on creative projects, what do you hear usually that is in the way from them taking this first step?
Right. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of different blocks that appear, and as you mentioned, creativity can come in all shapes and form, or like all different forms. Like writing your thesis, writing the process of writing is the output process, and before that, there's a lot of things brewing. And same with dancing as a form of expression. Creativity is involved there. And I think it can be said in all areas of creativity, but procrastination is a big one
Mm,
because creating, I feel for me at least, like creating something new is exciting but also scary. Doing something that you've done before is it comes naturally. You feel comfortable doing it, so you don't feel the need to procrastinate. But if you're creating something new, like if you have a blank canvas, it's sometimes a blank canvas can be so scary. It can be so like unintimidating from afar, but facing a
mm,
large white canvas and making your first brushstroke on it can be very scary. And that
mm,
can be said for, as I said, like different forms of output. But creating something new is a scary process. So I feel that for me and a lot of people, they feel that avoiding that first step is a way of protecting themselves as a survival instinct almost.
mm,
And you might not think it's procrastination. So like if you're looking up loads of YouTube videos on how to paint on a canvas, or what's like tips for like painting with acrylics, or you
mm,
read books, or you're going out talking to people, and it's part of the process, and it's not necessarily a bad thing because you're learning knowledge on how to do that first step. But ultimately, if you don't make that first step, then you're not going to get anywhere, and you're going to constantly be procrastinating, and
mm,
it's you're stagnant. You're in the same position. So
mm,
I think procrastination is quite big, and I feel it's
mm,
like something that's pulling us away. It's almost like a challenge for us.
mm,
Our path is right there, and that's the path that we need to take. But there's always these challenges and obstacles that are keeping us from going that path.
mm, mm.
So yeah, procrastination.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I I'm experiencing a lot of procrastination right now with my thesis, actually. So
Mm,
what you're saying, it makes a lot of sense. Can you walk us through an example in your life where you were feeling some sort of block? It could be procrastination or
mm,
whatever with a creative project, and how you were able to overcome it.
of course. Um, so at the moment or in the past?
It can
Or
be either if you're experiencing something now or something from the past.
okay. So in the past, I was drawing digitally for quite a long time. It's very easy to do, and the thing with digital art is very easy to redo. So you can make a mark and then you can easily erase it and go over it again. And at a point where I felt that I wanted to go back into using traditional mediums like acrylics and watercolor, that was a very difficult transition to make because using paints it's hard to undo. your strokes or whatever you do on piece of paper is permanent. So for the longest time, I procrastinated from doing that. I watched all the YouTube videos about painting with acrylics, and well, I did paint with acrylics before, but going back into it was a lot harder than I thought. So I was just like watching a lot of YouTube videos and kind of just drawing with like pencil, and just continue to draw digitally. But at a certain point, I took baby steps into um, going back into painting. So I would start drawing with pencil, then I would use like coloring pencils, maybe like pastels, oil pastels, and just like small sketches, nothing like big, like not even A4 size, like A5 size sketches, using these different mediums and getting back in touch with like the joy of creating with traditional mediums and getting your hands dirty.
Mm.
And that was a good process for me to kind of yeah, fall in love with using traditional mediums again, and therefore being okay with making mistakes as well. And that can
Mm.
always lead to different spontaneous ideas too. And this is something that you learn from these small sketches, is that you've made a mistake, but that mistake actually looks nice. It's
Mm.
it's actually better than I thought. And you're never going to produce something that you imagine in your head anyway. So I've learned from that process to enjoy this creating process and not overthink it too much. But the
Mm.
important thing is to make that first stroke. So yeah, I would say like baby steps, and yeah, baby steps and trying different mediums. In the
Mm.
case of like painting, at least.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of um, blocks there with perfectionism sounding like it's a big one.
Mm,
The overthinking, of course, what we talked about, the procrastination, and I think they're all very interlinked and
yeah.
connected with each other. I when I am in dance class and I'm feeling some kind of fear, whether because dance class is how it usually works is you warm up and then you learn the choreography from the teacher, the dance instructor, and then at the end everyone splits into tiny groups and performs in front of
Mm,
everyone. And that's how it's kind of like a moment to honor everyone for the hard work that they did and show how they picked it up and show how they express the movement through their bodies. And I always get a little bit uh, scared for the performance part of it because the big block there is the comparison of seeing other
mm,
people move in a way that you're like, wow, how is she able to do that? Why don't I look like that? And then perfectionism starts to kind of consume the body a little bit. And then you perform. And there's been many times that I've performed at the end of class thinking I could have, if I wasn't as in my head, because I was thinking I need to make this perfect or make this look like that, it would have been not just more fun, but so much better too. And I know the exact feeling of being in that flow, being connected to myself and not having all of these thoughts consume me compared to when I'm just one with the movement, if that makes sense. It's almost like something spiritual happening there. And what I found really helpful is um, dancers or I think any type of creative project is when you feel that fear. Mine definitely, I feel it a lot in my stomach area, the gut, the very primal parts of the body. I try to meet it with this presence and compassion because what I've learned is if you meet it with this judgment, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the feeling. And then it's almost like a paralysis thing where you're like, okay, I'm not even It's just
Mm.
not worth it. But if you kind of meet it with this sense of, hey, it's okay. If it's okay that I'm feeling this way, I haven't practiced in a while, or I haven't, been able to express myself in this way for months, kind of give yourself that permission to, not be the best. It's okay. But the most important thing is that you got out there and took the class, or you got out there and picked up the paintbrush, or you made that first step. And I think it's just so important. And that's just such a big philosophy of mine is we meet these parts of ourselves that are scared. And like you said, it's a protective mechanism. It's very, um, survival based. We meet that with this compassionate, tender gentleness in order to create some sustainable change with our creative projects. Because if it's not that, you know, softness, if it's more of this, like, stop screwing up, or why do you have to be like this, that self talk, it just grows and grows and grows and grows. I don't know if that resonates with you with some of your
Oh, that was
creative projects.
beautiful. That was beautiful. Like, yeah, 100%. Like, this voice that we have in our heads that's really strict and stoic, that really beats us down. And, I think a lot of people have gone through that same sort of experience of, talking harshly to themselves for not being able to push through those barriers. But
Mm,
as you said, like having this compassion and love for yourself and being okay with, not being able to take that first step and, you know, procrastinating a little bit. But yeah, I think that's very important when kind of going down this creative path as we talked about, like creativity or creating something new is very scary, so it's okay to feel resistance and feel
mm,
fear around that, but you're
mhm,
still doing things in the right direction, and that is something
mm,
that should be praised and complimented as well,
mm,
as you said. So I think
mm,
that sort of like self talk is very healing and also crucial when going out new endeavors. So yeah,
mm.
I do resonate a lot
Absolutely.
with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful pathway, creativity as a pathway to heal and to cultivate self-love and self-compassion. And I think, I don't know if this also resonates, but I believe in certain creative worlds, not maybe all of them, but there is this kind of, you know, non-compassionate way of working. Um, I'm specifically thinking it's more in movies like fashion or
Mm,
certain industries that really make it this super competitive, super need to produce all the time, like money's at the end of it. Just a way that cultivates a lot of not love but hatred, I think, in it. And I'm sure um, probably a lot of artists maybe sometimes stop their works because it's not what they imagined it would be. And this is really coming from a movie that I watched. It's what is it called? It's one in the fashion industry. I forgot, but if I remember it, I'll link it in the show notes. But I'm
okay.
wondering if that kind of culture of, it's not even tough love. It's like it's just missing the point of the creative process. It's more everything around it is more important.
Mm,
And it's seen as something, creativity is seen as something that just needs to get done in order to move on to the next thing.
mm. So is that something you would say that is more goal orientated rather than the process, more appreciating the process? Is that more like to do
Yeah.
with
And maybe something a little bit, um, there's something intersecting here with like capitalism and
um,
maybe more
the,
of a harsh,
the hustle
toxic,
culture?
masculine approach too.
Yeah, the hustle culture is something that has grown from, like, this capitalistic society, and results, results, results
Mm,
is everything. So yeah, I think like societally it's kind of made us this way,
mm,
because the environment does have a huge impact on the way we behave. And I felt a lot of that when I was working in the corporate world, because I'm in an environment where I'm pushed to produce results, and there is no care for different ways of thinking. And in my last job, I was a very highly driven company. It was a startup. It was very highly driven. They pushed everyone to the limits, but
mm,
and they wanted everyone to act and work in the same way. And for me, that was very difficult, because I naturally knew that I don't think within short time frames. I can't produce good quality work in short time frames. I need
mm,
more time to think about it, ruminate over certain ideas to produce my best work. So it's making it very difficult for all kinds of people to work in their own sort of way. And I think
mm,
everyone has their own working style, working pace, and this sort of like culture is making it very difficult for people to, you know, be themselves and also produce their best work.
mm, mhm,
And in turn, you forget about the process. If you can't enjoy the process, you can't produce the best work. And I feel that it's hard to continually produce if you can't enjoy the process and it's all about the goal.
mm,
Because if you enjoy the process, then it doesn't matter what the outcome is. It doesn't matter if
yeah,
it, fails or if it does well. You do it because you like doing it. So
mm,
I think this is a big way of defeating perfectionism, is not being fixated on how many likes you get, how many people
mm,
talk about, comment on your work, but you do it because you enjoy the process of making something. And yeah, I feel if you don't take a step back from this hustle, hustle, hustle sort of environment, it's hard to see like how important that process is, and how it's okay to honor your own pace and your own style of work.
mm.
Might have gone a bit off topic.
No, that was
Yeah.
that was exactly what I wanted to hear too. That it was beautiful. It really, I couldn't agree more. It's the process. If you enjoy it, then it's so much more sustainable. You're not afraid to get the hands dirty again. You're not afraid to go back in. And then there might be seasons that you're not enjoying the process, and that's
Right.
okay too.
Yeah.
I think there's just life happens. Stuff happens. Humans are constantly evolving and changing, as we both know. And there's going to be some months, some years maybe that it's just a little bit harder than others. And some years that you're just feeling super inspirational and just wanting to do something every day that is part of your work. But yeah, it's the gentleness, I think, is just so key. And what you said, just honor yourself, honor where you're at, and find that find that center somehow. You brought up meditation, and I couldn't agree more. I think meditation is such a beautiful way to really eliminate the noise, eliminate the distractions, and take yourself out of this whirlwind of thoughts that probably aren't even, it's not you, and it's maybe not even your voice, and it might be someone else's from your family or a friend or colleagues. Like, I think that happens a lot with people where they realize, like, that's not even, like, this sounds like my dad's voice inside my, or my mom's voice, or
Right. Right.
someone
Right.
else that is not me. Why are they in there? So training our minds to become, to cultivate more strength is so, so important. I'm actually going on a meditation retreat
Oh,
after. we record this podcast. Yeah, I'm going to Chiba today to do a silent meditation retreat for the
Oh
next
wow.
5 days. And I have certainly thought about this specific thing that we're talking about, how sometimes you just really need to take yourself out of it or kind of just take a step back and look at the full craziness that goes on in the modern world. And it's just, we're constantly connected to some sort of, you know, noise or distraction or communication or whatever it is. So it is absolutely difficult to then find a space to produce at the pace and at the capacity that you would like. So I think that's such a beautiful tool, meditation. Do you have any other tools for people that you've practiced or that you've heard other people incorporate into their lives as well that have worked?
I think for me, like meditation is the biggest form. Um,
Mm.
and I'm so happy that you're going on this retreat. Like, it's I've never done a retreat, but like I would love to do one day. So
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, like other forms, I would say like journaling. I do a lot as well to kind of because there's so much noise that you have to process. There's so much information going through the brain every single day, and without outputting it or without storing it somewhere, it's like having like multiple tabs open at the same time, right? Like your browser tabs open at the same time, and if there is no output, then it's always going to be crowded. Sorry, and yeah, it's hard to think clearly. And going back to our previous conversation where we said that creating something comes from no mind and inner stillness, and
Mhm.
by outputting it through journaling, you help that process of clearing up the space and having
Mm.
keeping that clear mind. So journaling is a big one for me. Like whenever I have something brewing or whenever I'm feeling some sort of resistance in my head, then I'll write it down. And as you write it down, then things come kind of like unfolds, and you end up like writing pages and pages because so many things just come out. And I think there's no need to just talk about one topic. Like there's something on your
Mm.
mind, let's just write about this topic. I think it can go in so many different directions from there, and go
Mm.
in so many different tangents, and just like let that flow out because that's just your mind, your body telling you that this is something that we need to talk about, and just letting it go. And then once you've done all of that, you've let it all out, then you feel a lot lighter, I feel.
Mm.
So that's one thing. Movement as well, any sort of movement
Mhm.
allows us to you know breathe. So meditation focuses on the breath, but like it really pushes like oxygen around the body, really helps
Mm.
us to activate the mind by sending more oxygen to sorry sending more oxygen to the brain, and it just feels good, right? Like you feel good when you're dancing around the house, or you're doing going for a jog, going for a walk, especially if it's in nature, then you're absorbing all the vitamin D and the natural energies. So yeah, like taking a walk outside, movement are other ways that I feel are very soothing and helps me to maintain that space for myself.
Mm.
Because
Mhm.
I do find that when I go into nature, I find that stillness again. But then when I come
Mm.
back into the city, I notice now that I'm slowly being dragged into that sort of pace of the city life.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, noticing that and kind of trying to bring it back to that inner stillness is
Mm.
is a journey in itself.
Mm, absolutely. Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nori. I've loved this conversation. I love talking with you. You're so cool. You're so cool. Um, I want the listeners to know first what's next and what's in store for Nori, what's happening this year, 2024, if you would like to share anything with
Mm,
work or projects or offerings. And then I also want you to share where listeners can connect with you.
mm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation as well, and it's almost quite strange because this is like our maybe like second proper meeting, I would say, because like the first one was
Yeah.
just a very brief sort of encounter at this networking event. So this is our second proper encounter, and it feels so natural to talk about these things. Yeah, and I enjoy our conversations. So yeah, thank you very
Mm-hmm.
much for this opportunity. And you asked some very great questions, and I've talked about things that I don't normally talk about or I've never talked about before. So thank you for drawing that out of me. And yeah, for this year, I think it will be more focused on the coaching side of things rather than the artistry. Of course, I would like to still draw because that's my form of expression, and I like to do so, but probably less frequent. And yeah, I really want to kind of build this platform where I can share what I've learned over the years with people, whether that be through workshops or podcasts or YouTube videos. So like probably making a lot of content around that, and at the same time helping people through coaching to live more, well, create more and live better. So yeah, I think it's going to be a fun year of a lot of learning, a lot of new experiences, and hopefully a lot of fun as well.
Absolutely. Oh, and where can listeners connect with you?
Oh yes, you can connect with me on Instagram, Nori William _art, noriwilliam.com. I'm currently rebranding at the moment, so it's
All
kind of
right.
a odd time. Because I want to build a platform where it's not just art, it's art and this like self growth
Mm. Mhm.
coaching. So I'm rebranding it to this thing called Goodwill Studios, which I'm building at the moment, which is basically just a combination of self expression and mindfulness. And so yeah, like that's I do have an account on Instagram called Goodwill Studios as well, but that's just started. So yeah, predominantly broadcasted in Japanese as well, because
Great.
I want more Japanese audiences to be aware of like self like wellness.
Mm.
So yeah, like I think those two spaces would be the main ones.
Great. Yes, and I'll make sure to link that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Nori. It was such a beautiful conversation. I definitely want you back on the podcast so we can go deeper and deeper into different dimensions. This was just the beginning.
Oh wow, yeah, that'd be
But
great.
yes. And thank you so much for the Light of Insight community and listeners for tuning in. And we will see you next time on another episode. Bye.